John, thanks so much for being on the podcast. I really appreciate it. I mean, how fun is this that we are out in the middle of the Black Rock Desert, literally in the middle of the playa, after having driven hundreds of miles of trails and backcountry roads just to get here. And I just thought it would be really interesting to have you on the show because you have this very storied background that I think that our readers will really enjoy. And so kind of give me, what was your first adventure? What was the first thing that sparked this desire to see the world? And not only see the world as a traveler like you have, but you've also worked around the world as an executive and as an engineer and as a product planner. I mean, this is a really interesting path you've taken.
Yeah, so I grew up traveling. My mother was English. My father was American. I was born in London, immigrated to the U.S. when I was 6 months old. And my parents both had a love for travel. And also growing up in the U.S. in North Carolina, my mother felt it was very important that I understand kind of the British part of who I was. And so there was a lot of travel, usually every 2 years, between the U.S. and the UK. My dad was a university professor, and so he had summers off, and so we were able to do some travel, some extended trips to the UK where I even went to school there and things like that.
Wow.
So I just kind of grew up with travel and going places, really just kind of being part of the DNA. I couldn't imagine doing anything else other than that.
And I remember you mentioning how much your parents also enjoyed travel and that they wanted to instill that in you. What were some of the first trips that you did with them?
So it really was a lot of travel to Europe, and both to kind of England and France and Switzerland mainly, and then a lot of trips up and down the U.S. East Coast because. When my parents, growing up with my parents, we were a good family, but we were not an especially wealthy family. So travel meant going to visit people and friends and people whose houses we could stay in and things like that. So I grew up, never, though we didn't want for anything, something like going out to eat or going to a restaurant or staying in a hotel would have been a completely foreign experience to me. So we grew up going to travel to visit with people and to make new friends and experience them and their culture and just kind of learn about the world. Everywhere we went, we'd go to the museums, we'd go to the historical landmarks, the national monuments, that sort of thing. So I grew up loving that, and then later on, that expanded to kind of my love of the nature and the backcountry and things like that. When my parents got married. They got married in England, and for their honeymoon, they did a tour around Europe in an old Volkswagen Beetle. And then when they, then in the U.S. Several years later, they did the same thing and traveled all around the U.S. Again in a Volkswagen Beetle.
And I mean, these not only sounds formative for your parents, but those experiences for you seem very formative. And if I remember from your story, you transitioned to going into the military. Was that the first time that you got to, as a single person, as a young person, leave your parents and go travel?
Yeah, absolutely. I tried going to college, and it was something I just wasn't ready for. I'd spent the past 12 years of my life sitting in classes, and so when it came time to actually have a choice, I decided, you know what? Education's important to me, but there's some other things I want to do right now. And my father had served in the military. He was a World War II veteran. My mother's family was a British naval family, and so military service tends to run in families, and it certainly did for me. And I viewed it as a great way to kind of unplug from moving through the education system, do something different, but then also have the ability to come back and complete it and have it not be kind of a negative on my resume or anything like that. Everybody, and America is great about this compared to some other countries. There's always this great respect for military and military service. And so I can say that nobody ever held it against me that I didn't go straight to college, that I went into the military as enlisted and then went and pursued a college degree.
It was exactly the same for me.
Yeah.
I was hopeless for my first couple semesters out of high school.
Yeah.
I definitely recognized that I needed to grow up. I needed to expand my horizons. I needed to find my way.
Yeah.
And the military was a really great way to do that. And as a traveler, having been in the military, where did you get to travel in the military, and what were some of the things that you learned? Because if I remember, you were doing a reconnaissance, fixed-wing reconnaissance in the Army. So that's a very interesting job. How did that start to translate into the next steps for you?
Yeah. So I was military intelligence. So it was aerial reconnaissance, electronic warfare signals gathering. So where some people take photographs or take infrared pictures, I was looking for radar signals, emitters, meaning that every missile system has a radar system associated with it. And if you can figure out where that radar system is and the characteristics of it, you can say what missile system is associated there. So really neat stuff, and I really enjoyed it. And I got to travel a lot of places. I spent a lot of time in Key West because when I was in the military, there was still a Soviet Union there, when they still rotated troops in and out of Cuba every 6 months. So every 6 months we were in Cuba, in Key West, checking out what was going on in Cuba. And fortunately, one of our rotations, we went there for 45 days, twice a year. One of those rotations always coincided with spring break, so it was very.
That was memorable.
It was great. I was 21 years old, and I was getting paid to go to Key West for 45 days during spring break. Right, so that's where you think, you know what, life is not that bad.
Again, formative years, right?
Right. And had a great time doing that. Later on, I ferried our aircraft all the way from Savannah, Georgia, up the East Coast to Goose Bay, to Sandra-Stromford in Greenland, Keflavik, Iceland, Prestwick, Scotland, Stuttgart, and then down into southern Europe, into Egypt, and then western Saudi Arabia to eastern Saudi Arabia, where we then brought our intelligence gathering systems online. So that was a great trip. Yeah. Man, lots of great travels, and you wish you could spend more time in each place. But it's just great things to do.
And how did you go from fixed wing reconnaissance to being in executive and director positions and product planning and development for GE and Sony and Johnson & Johnson around the world? How did that transition happen?
I was a lot more successful at my second attempt at college than my first attempt. The military teaches you that it's not a matter of either or, right? You can go out and have, a personal life, party hard, right? Yeah. You can be in great shape, but you can also work 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it teaches you that you can accomplish all of these things. It's not around deciding which, because you don't have a choice. You kind of got to do them all. And so when I went back to college, I was president of the engineering student body. I did really well in my classes, and graduated in really good standing. And so when I graduated, and it was an electrical engineering degree, so it tied in with my electrical technician experience that I had in the military. And so I got hired on by GE, General Electric, into their Edison engineering program, which is their technical leader development program, and a pretty prestigious placement. It meant that they felt that you had the potential to do something. And they backed that up with a lot of training and a lot of really good experiences. And so getting into that program at GE really kind of helped to send me on. And GE sent me to Budapest to work along with my wife. And so that was my first international assignment, working in Budapest, which was phenomenal.
And was this during the Jack Welch years?
Yeah, and there was the Jack Welch years.
And what were some of the key takeaways for you? We talk about on the podcast leadership and management because it relates directly back to us as travelers. If we're traveling in a group or a team, or we're traveling with a partner, learning how to manage ourselves and manage risk. And what were some of the key takeaways for you during, because Jack Welch was quite notable at the time. What were some of the key learnings?
I mean, he was a real transformational leader, and his impact was felt throughout the businesses. One was that, the GE felt that they had to renew their employees, and if you were the bottom 10%, then you were gone every year, and people kind of knew and understood that. And I've kind of helped people with cleaning out their desks after they worked for GE for many years, and who just kind of acknowledged that, I was no longer the guy they needed me to be, which was really, really hard. But GE had phenomenal results during the Jack Welch years, and gave me the chance to go and work in Budapest, which was, again, a young kind of wet behind the ears engineer, to be sent over there to really have a chance to get a feel for that business and what was going on, and really impact the direction that took. I had a sponsor for that, who was a great general manager, one of the best leaders that I've worked for. I've worked for a lot of great people, and so it was just, you got to work with really smart people. And I got to appreciate that that being able to work with the right team, to work with really smart people, you can do amazing things, and it's really energizing, exciting work. You're just excited to go to work every day.
So you've got all of this leadership training that you got in the military, all of these experiences that gave you confidence out in the world. Now you've worked with GE. What comes next for you?
So I worked for Sony Electronics in Pittsburgh. My wife was pursuing a degree at the University of Pittsburgh, and so there really wasn't an opportunity for me to stay with GE. And so Sony was setting up a new technology center, and so I went and worked for Sony and helped to set up that technology center. And this was the time when General Electric and a lot of other businesses were getting involved with something called Six Sigma, or process excellence. And so I was in on the kind of ground floor on that as a General Electric black belt. And Sony started to do that. And so I ended up having a broader role with Sony in this whole thing of process improvement. How do you improve businesses so that they're really more focused on what the customer wants? And then I went on to Johnson & Johnson and did kind of the same thing. And so I was able to kind of ride the wave of that into some successively, more senior positions. So it worked out really well for me.
Perfect. I got a note from Paula here.
Sorry, can you turn the lights back on? The fire's going out.
Oh, the fire's going out? Yeah.
It's kind of getting bright. We can,
Oops. Oh, sorry. I was going to do it for you.
let's just keep rolling.
Okay.
But
It just times out. You just need to press the start button again. And it should
just need a
fire
little
up.
more light back
There you
there
go.
with you guys.
And then are we just probably out of propane maybe?
Out of fire.
We'll see if it, yeah, maybe I'll
Maybe open it up.
just maybe let it just settle.
Oh,
That's better.
nice.
Yeah.
You're just going to have to crouch behind that and shake the bottle over.
So I think it sort of relaxed. Or
Yeah.
I don't know.
You're in focus, just I'm not getting your eyes are soft. Your eyes are soft.
I'm so soft.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you.
No, thank you, Paula. Okay, we're rolling. So all of this business experience, and not only that, but international business, time in business, you start to come back to the U.S. and you start to travel more. You start to develop a little bit of a love for Land Rovers and
Yep.
and other things. What was your first four-wheel drive vehicle that you really started to explore and travel in?
Well, my first four-wheel drive was a 1975 K5 Blazer. Just great piece of Detroit garbage at the time. I mean, you love it, but it rusted as you were looking at it. I still have a great deal of affection for it. That K5 Blazer. A lot of vehicles, reflect what was in that K5 Blazer, and so that was the first one that I had. The first vehicle that I started to really get in trouble with was a Range Rover that I bought. I bought it, and while I still had the temporary tags on it, managed to get it stranded in Death Valley up in the Panamints, having destroyed 2 tires, and in the process kind of did. And my wife was with me, and we pretty much did everything that you're not supposed to do. You're supposed to stay with the vehicle. We didn't do that. You're supposed to not split up. We didn't do that. So we got lost separately and separate from the vehicle. And but we survived it. And everything you survive, you learn from.
Sure.
There's a great saying that I love, is that good judgment is a result of experience, and experience is usually a result of poor judgment. And so I would say that I have displayed enough poor judgment to have gained a lot of experience.
Me too.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's all about having the right attitude. My wife and I were stuck here on the playa several years ago in our Fuso-based expedition vehicle, where we buried it up to the frame rails, an 18,500-pound vehicle, and it took a mini excavator and a bulldozer to get us out, because we'd done such a good job of getting ourselves stuck.
Thoroughly so. Yeah.
But the thing is, when you tell stories, nobody wants to hear about the day when everything went great, right? The great stories are when everything went really, really badly, but you somehow struggled and figured out how to make it work. And I've always loved those challenges. And I'll probably continue to give myself those challenges, because I just like to try different things. If you're not pushing the envelope of what you think you can do, then you're not getting better. And that kind of brings us full circle to why I'm here with you and why we have the Nimble Evolution behind us. Yeah,
absolutely, and you can see it in our time today driving it. You can see a lot of experience and a lot of lessons learned from that. What were some of the lessons that you learned in the design of your Fuso camper that then you thought about you wanted to do different with the Nimble Evolution?
Well, so the Fuso was really, really heavy. 18,500 pounds on a 14,000-pound chassis that we off-roaded vigorously. And so we broke the frame in both frame rails completely. And it was in this odd position where the camper and the subframe was actually supporting the frame of the vehicle and not the other way around. And it had a lot of flex. So I ended up doing a complete frame replacement on that vehicle. And it really sensitized me to weight and also the base vehicle, because weight is so important, and choosing the correct base vehicle that you're going to build your platform on. I've just seen, especially in the truck camper world, suspensions done improperly, vehicles lifted improperly. There's a lot of work that goes out there that just it doesn't hold up. And I believe that a real overland vehicle needs to work on the road, because let's face it, in the U.S., 90% of our miles are going to be on the road, and a lot of it's going to be at 75 or 85 miles an hour. So you got to be comfortable and feel safe with that. But it's also got to work for where we were today, where we went all over the Black Rock Desert.
Yeah, low range.
Yeah.
Differential locks, steep climbs, everything else.
And I think part of my love for Land Rovers, and especially the solid axle era of Land Rovers, is that there really was that passion that it had to work in both worlds. It's easy to build a very capable off-road vehicle, easy to build a really great car for cruising down the highway. The challenge is how do you make those two things happen? And for a real overland vehicle, you got to have both. It's got to work in both worlds.
You're right, because we have so much distances to cover, and if the vehicle if it can't go fast enough, it takes us that much longer to get where we want to go play.
Right.
Or if you're gripped the whole time that you're doing it, then the driver's fatigued and you have the opportunity for accidents. And we've both seen that.
Yeah,
Certainly.
I mean, and coming here, we probably did maybe 200 miles of asphalt, 50 miles of fairly good gravel, right? Which you want to be able to drive at 50 miles an hour, or
Sure.
otherwise it's just going to take you forever. But then, then the road gets twistier and it starts to climb, and then you got to kind of change modes and to have a vehicle that really functions, especially carrying a payload. That's really gets to be a challenge, and I like challenges. Because I really think it's got to work in all of those different environments to really be the right stuff.
And you've kind of developed a little bit of a love for the Ford platform.
Yeah.
Share with the listeners, why have you kind of settled on the F350 or the Ford F-Series Super Duty as being kind of your weapon of choice for travel?
So I mean, we'll build on whatever chassis anybody wants. It's 1 ton or greater that meets certain specifications. But what we really like, what we really advocate is what Ford is doing with their F350. I mean, you look at the Super Duty, where they have the Tremor package. You look at the half ton when they had their Raptor, and they really seem to be taking the off-road, the people that off-road these vehicles seriously, and to really be looking at that for the 1 ton trucks is amazing. So I like that. I like that Ford is being creative. I mean, you look at what's coming down the pipeline for them. You look at the reception that the Bronco has. You look at this magnificent 7.3 liter motor that they have, which is meant to be a long life motor. It's a fleet motor that construction companies, that municipalities, that utilities are going to use. It's a old school pushrod V8, and normally aspirated. Just a fun motor.
Yeah.
Tons of torque. It has almost 500 foot-pounds of torque. And yeah, a couple of years ago, you had to buy a diesel to get that. So torquey, fun to drive. None of the emissions concerns with a diesel. I have a couple of old school diesels myself, and no DEF, no particulate filters, and I love them. All right, we've talked about my van that I had. Yeah,
thing's awesome.
Fantastic. But if I were looking at a new vehicle, I wouldn't buy a diesel. It's too much hassle. I've heard too many stories from people who had their diesel go into limp mode. They had to get it towed to a dealer. It took them 5 days to look at it, and it ended up being a blown fuse or a little 50-cent sensor. But it's absolutely immobilizes you. A little thing just immobilizes you, and I don't want that if I'm out in the backcountry.
Yeah, very true. And also, the challenge internationally is finding ultra-low sulfur diesel. And that's another reason why so many more international overland travelers are picking gasoline engines. I mean, I think about a Ranger that I've been driving for a little while now. It's got plenty of power and torque, and it gets well into the 20s miles per gallon, even lightly modified. And I think a lot of that comes down to the fact that they're getting so much more power out of small engines. That's not the case of the 7.3, but in a lot of these motors, they're turbocharging them, and then they're bolting on a 10-speed transmission. And that was what I noticed most about driving the 7.3 is with that 500 foot-pounds of torque, I'm going from first to second all the way up to 10th gear, and it's keeping me in that power band, in that sweet spot of the torque range. And it was very evident driving it that this is not the 5.7, it's not the 5.3, it's not the engines, the 302s, for example, the 350s that came before it. These are definitely motors that have evolved.
I think the vehicles should be fun to drive. And I ask you, is that F350 with the 7.3 fun to drive?
It's pretty fun. Well, especially when we hit really fast speeds on the Playa.
Yeah. So it's fun, right? And did you miss the diesel?
No, I didn't.
No.
And especially one of the things that I did notice, now at very low speeds off highway when you're in technical terrain, a diesel does have that very reassuring torque to it.
Yeah.
But this isn't far behind it. Again, at 500 foot-pounds of torque, it would be similar to one of the earlier 7.3 diesels
Right.
for actual torque output. So they've come so far. And the fact that you have that flexibility of a much broader RPM range, the vehicle is able to be much more responsive, in my mind.
Yeah. So yeah, it's fun to drive.
It totally is. So what were some of the other things that you learned from the Range Rovers? Now, you had P38 Range Rovers.
Yeah, a glutton for punishment. But you joke about it, but it's the last solid axle Range Rover. It's the last of its kind, and kind of just a unsung hero. I've really loved mine. It had some truly innovative technologies on it for the time. First H-gate shifter instead of having to have a separate shifter for the transfer case. The traction control system and the hydraulic traction control system instead of just an air power. It's a really, really strong. There was a lot of innovation in that platform, and I have one that's 20 years old, and I still drive it on a regular basis, four-wheel it on a regular basis. I've got a 20-year-old Maggiolina rooftop tent on it, which performs well. And if I'm going to Moab, that's what I'm taking, because I'm driving the trails in comfort, I'm camping in comfort, but it can go everywhere I want to go.
And one of the other vehicles that you have that you've talked about and have a lot of love for, we both have some love for the Suzukis. Talk a little bit about your Samurai.
I mean, for a day tripper, right?
Yeah.
Just to go out and play, it's hard to beat the Samurai. Yeah, I mean, it's a 2,000-pound vehicle with a 1.3 liter engine, but it just putt-putts along, and I'm used to driving these big, heavy vehicles. And so, I can drive through things where I would sink to the axles, if not the frame, immediately, and I can just kind of bounce along on top with the Samurai. The Samurai is a great platform, and where I live, I'm surrounded by BLM land, and there's lots and lots of ATV trails, side-by-side trails, and my Samurai is smaller than most side-by-sides. And so I can
gotten big.
Right, and I got a license plate on it, so I can actually drive it to the trail legally.
And with all of these different vehicles that you've had, and these building large expedition campers, and now helping to design improvements around the Nimble vehicle, working with your team on that, and launching now this prototype. If someone is looking to build a camper or buy a camper, in your mind, what do you feel are some of the most critical components or decision sets around purchasing or building their own camper?
Right. Well, I mean, so first thing is that I'm a DIY guy at heart. I love making stuff, and so I always have a lot of time for people who are saying they want to build their own camper, because I think that's great. I mean, if it's something that you really want to do, then you should do it, right? I just don't believe that necessarily it'll save you time or money to do it, but if it's what you want to do, it's what you're passionate around, do it. We're a Webasto authorized reseller, and so we're factory trained. We know how to make the Webastos work. We get a lot of people showing up saying, "Hey, I got my heater installed. I bought it from some kind of gray marketplace because Webasto won't sell you a heater without an installation, and so it's hard for them to get support." But we'll say, what? We charge you our minimum diagnostic fee. We'll take a look at it, see if we can't get you going. And for probably 90% of the people, we get them out in under an hour. So I think that doing it yourself is good, but also knowing when to call for help is good. And I think a lot of professional builders, not just me, but others, everyone has a lot of time for somebody that's trying to do it themselves, because we've all kind of been there. We just have a lot of cycles of learning and have figured out how to do things. But it's building your own is awesome. If you have the garage for it, if you have the skills, but the process of building it needs to be fun for you.
Yeah, I would agree.
If the end result is to just get an expedition vehicle, buy an expedition vehicle instead of working to build it. Work overtime or work a second job and take that money and use it to buy it, and you'll be ahead of the game. But if you really like making stuff, if you like figuring stuff out, build your own. You'll have a great time.
Yeah, absolutely. And what would you say would be like the 3 most important performance attributes of an expedition camper?
I think it's, of course, comfort. And then capability and security, right? So you want a vehicle that you're going to be able to be comfortable in, and depending on who you are and where you are in your life, your definition of comfort is going to be different, right? 20 years ago, my definition of comfort was these thermarests are really cool things, right? And then I moved on to, this roof tent is really cool.
Sure.
Right. But then you say, you know what? It's kind of nice to not be forced to camp outside the camper if the weather's really bad. Like tonight is great, right? But if it were raining, it'd really be nice to where we could do this inside the camper and have this chat, right? So being able to have that option, being able to have a bed that isn't also my dining room table. All right, so for my wife and I, that's one of the things that we figured out. That certainly having a bed that converts into a table is very space efficient. But when you're on the road for months at a time, it's just a hassle. And you don't want to do it. And it's nice to have some separate areas that you can be in. So having a shower, being able to cook food, being able to keep food cold, things like that. Not things that are exclusive to what we do, but to me, that's a lot of the
Those
package.
Those are important factors.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I noticed driving the vehicle today was how well it did off highway. Yeah. What are some of the things that you think are critical around full drive performance for these big, heavy campers?
And so I've been doing this for a long time with a lot of different ways, and the most important thing is to really set up the suspension correctly. Do the shocks, do the springs, and do it right. I see a lot of people when they build a vehicle, or even somebody has a truck camper that they're putting on and it's heavy. And what do? They add airbags, they add helper bags, and that's just kind of covering up a problem. It doesn't solve the problem. The real problem, the real problem is that your suspension isn't right. And so when we do a suspension, we have a couple of great partners. We have Icon that we use they do a really slick coilover conversion that we're doing on the front. We do their remote reservoir shocks all around. For the rear, which is leaf sprung, what we do is we actually, when we have the flatbed built, we have 4,000 pounds of concrete that we put on the flatbed, and we take it down to a partner of ours in downtown Sacramento, Sacramento Spring, that we call the Leaf Spring Whisperers, right? They've been doing leaf springs. I think there's 2 brothers, and between them, they've been doing it for like 60 years. And so they are just the masters at setting up leaf springs for us, local to us. There's some other great companies. I have Deaver springs on my Fuso. Got nothing bad to say about Deaver. In fact, I've never heard anybody say anything bad about Deaver. But we have Sacramento Spring local to us, and they're fantastic as well. And so I think it's really finding somebody that instead of patching the suspension with airbags or something to try and compensate for the deficiencies in it, really just take the time to set it up right. And, it takes some time, but when you look at the total budget for the project, setting up the suspension is not a big part of it, but it's so important.
I would agree. In fact, I think that suspension, despite the use case scenario, is almost always the time that's best spent, in my mind. Okay. All right. Yep, no problem.
These things shut off.
So both cameras quit at 30 minutes, which was like 1.5 questions ago.
Okay, but we got audio.
Well, we started rolling again. There's
First
still a
one
little mess.
Okay.
We can pick up at
Yeah, that's
the end.
fine.
Okay.
But is yours
It's always-
okay?
Is this thing gonna
Just
make
double
it or
check,
not?
that was not seeing anything on my screen.
Do you want to cut and start
Yeah,
new
okay.
sound and stuff?
Yeah, we've got just a couple questions left, so
Okay, there it's got my screen back.
Okay, yeah, his screen went black.
Yeah, and it changed my shutter speed, so.
it's okay.
I am so getting nervous.
What's it?
Yeah, we'll just keep. Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Sorry.
No, it's all good. Yeah, they have that 30-minute shut off. No problem.
No.
Glad that they did that.
So you guys are talking about if you want to pick it up at the end. It was the question before you were talking about the comfort of the bed,
Okay.
thermarest stuff.
Yeah, maybe we'll.
Such a good one.
Well, it's all in the audio, but
No, that's fine. It happens. We're,
Are you rolling?
yeah. Rolling.
You rolling? So I'll just ask that question again.
okay.
So when we think about preparing expedition campers like the Nimble or something that someone has made themselves or even a competitive brand, I've certainly got things in my mind that I see as very important, like performance and driver fatigue, and that the chassis is rated for the load. Those are things that I immediately look towards. And I think that a lot of companies do it right, and then there are a few that don't do it right. But in your mind, what are the most important attributes when you look to design an expedition camper?
So we look at it in terms of comfort and capability. All right. So the comfort is the habitat, and also the the driving position, as you mentioned, because the distances are huge in America, right? So you have a lot of highway miles, and so having a really well-appointed cabin is nice, and it just you have less driver fatigue. In fact, these new vehicles, they'll even tell you if they think you're fatigued.
Sure.
This F-350 will literally tell you it's time to stop and have a cup of coffee, because they're watching you as you drive down the lane, and they see as you start to wander. And so, one of the things that we put a lot of effort into is maintaining all of those comfort, convenience, safety features that these vehicles have. It's why we have this bumper built by Descent Off-Road for us instead of a huge brush bar thing, because we wanted to maintain the stock approach angle. We wanted to maintain the stock sensors, both the vehicle position sensors, the forward view camera, the active cruise control, because those are all great amenities, that I like, and you shouldn't have to give those up. So that, and then also the comfort of the cabin. For me, having a separate bed, a real bed, we have a memory foam mattress in there that's really nice and comfortable, as you can say, right?
Yeah, for sure. I slept in it last night. Yeah.
And but also having it separate from the kind of the day use area, the dinette with seating and things like that, where you have a little map table, or you can actually plug in your GPS and plan your next day or review what you did the day before. Having a full shower and enough water to do that. We have 75-gallon water tank, and making it simple, right? So one of the changes that we've been able to make is that you don't have to settle for diesel appliances if you have a gasoline vehicle. So we match the appliances to the vehicle, and we run it directly from the vehicle fuel tank. So you want to buy the F-350 with the 7.3, which we really like, then your appliances are going to be gas. If you want to buy a Ram with a Cummins diesel in it, then you're going to have diesel appliances. You're not going to have to worry about it. It's going to be the same controls. It's going to work, but it's going to be kind of worry-free. And so, I think that's important. Using name brand components. Not using We we really make an effort to make sure everything that we use is of top quality by brands that you'll recognize with warranties that you'll like. I mean, the lithium-ion battery packs that we're putting in now come with 10-year warranties on them.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's crazy. Yeah. We try to buy local, and that's a local company for us. Battleborn does it. They're an hour away from our shop.
Yeah, one of the things I noticed was that the vehicle has a lot of emphasis on performance, particularly off highway. The on-road is a given, and it works as you would expect it to. But what I was really surprised by was the off-road performance. And it really, for me, it came down to the suspension setup. So what are some of the things that you see as being critical around suspension setup?
Having good partners, right? Because we're not a suspension house. We're an assembly, spec it and assemble it, and to finding the right people and making the right choices, because really that's what our customers are relying on us for, our expertise. And so we worked with Icon. Icon has a really nice coilover front suspension that we really like, and we use their shocks all around. We use their wheels, and then rear suspension is the trickier part because there's no kind of off-the-shelf leaf spring package that you can put on. So we're lucky that Sacramento still has a large agricultural community, and there's a company called Sacramento Spring that does a lot of agricultural spring repair, in addition to custom springs for folks like us. And they've been doing it for 60 years plus. And so these guys really know what they're doing. What we do is we build our flatbed. We put 4,000 pounds of concrete on it, and we take the truck down to Sacramento Spring and say, right, set up these springs to work for this load. And they do it, and they do amazing work. And Sacramento Spring, they're just local to us, and we really like them. But there's a couple of others around the country. Deaver comes to mind. I've used Deaver springs on my Fuso. They do great work. I've never heard anybody say anything bad about Deaver. And there's a couple of others, but it's almost kind of a dying art, because springs are just these throwaway things now. So to find a company that can actually reforge or forge springs is tough. But to get it done right, that's what you got to do. You can't just put airbags on. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, it doesn't hold up. Yeah, it doesn't hold up at all.
Yeah.
Well, that's all really good advice. There's a couple questions that I like to ask during these interviews. Do you have a couple books that have been influential in your life, either in business or as a traveler? Are there any books that come to mind that are sitting on or that maybe you even give away as gifts?
I think it's hard to answer, because it seems like I get so much of my content bite-sized on the internet these days. Some of the best training and guides that I've had, and this is actually more of a DVD series, but the work that Bill Burke has done. I've done, over the years, months and months of training with Bill Burke. And so, for me, it's more experiential than just reading a book, but it's having somebody that can actually teach you. And I'm a big fan of Bill. There's other great trainers out there. But it's kind of the equivalent of, when people say, well, I know how to drive off-road. Nobody can teach me something. That's kind of the same. Well, suppose I was able to set you up with a Formula One driver for a week. Do you think you would learn something from that person? Or do you think that your automotive skills are so good that you couldn't learn something from a Formula One driver? Some of these trainers out here, these four-wheel drive trainers, are so good that that they're just at such a different level. And you can, in the course of a day or a week, you can just soak up some information from them to become a much better, more confident driver, able to take on more obstacles and basically just enjoy yourself.
Yeah, it makes so much sense. We invest so much in the vehicle.
Yeah.
And these trips are sometimes the trip of a lifetime.
Yeah.
And for it to be cut short because of a lack of driver skill or a lack of awareness of the right technique, I think that's money well spent. Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I would agree. And if someone is just getting into overland travel, or they're just thinking about their first trip, their first big trip, what would be the first piece of advice that you would give someone who wants to go travel?
Stay local at first, right? It's, put training wheels on, and even though you're planning to go across the country or something like that, or you're going up to the Arctic Ocean, or going south down into Mexico and points further south down in Guatemala, whatever. Start local. Start with training wheels. Go and camp at the closest campground you can find.
Sure.
Because that's going to be enough of an experience for you that first time out. And then ease into it. Especially if you have partners that are maybe a little unwilling, or whatever. You take baby steps, because it's going to be enough. You're going to find out that you forgot stuff. First time out, you're going to find out you forgot something ridiculous, that would completely sink the whole event. So, but if you're in town, you know where the Walmart is, or the Target, or the REI, and you can go and solve that problem. So ease into it. There's going to be great adventures ahead, but get ready for it first.
Yeah, that step by step. That's great. That's great advice, because even on this trip, I'm always learning, and I'm so grateful for the fact that every time I travel, I take away some realization of something that I could have brought that was different, or something that I could have left at home, or something that I could have done different as a traveler. You're right. Even the local trips, you learn so much from it.
It's either wow, that worked really well, I'm going to have to remember that, or wow, I'm not going to do that again. Right?
Yeah, I've had a lot of those don't do that again moments, for sure. John, thank you so much for the time, and thank you for showing me Northern Nevada.
Yeah.
And the Black Rock Desert. And what was the trail that we did today? We were up in the mountains.
It was the Calico Mountains that we went up into.
Wow, that was amazing.
Not even one of the popular trails, but really neat. Yeah. There's, I think I told you, I love the lesser known trails, the things where you just get out and see what you can find, versus to say, oh, we have this obstacle and this feature when you've got a guide. It's just going out and exploring.
Yeah, I agree. And we did that today, and that was really fun. Well, thank you again. Thanks for being on the show. I appreciate it, John, and we will talk to you next time.